So during the past week, I've gotten to cover a little bit of an introduction. That was the first video in the series that I published, and going on the past 3 days, I took a little bit more of a deep dive into my experience with Freestyle Friday, DJ Jams, in addition to where we're sitting at right now, the College Beats compound. And although I did get a little bit personal in the first video, in the introduction, I wanted to get a little bit more personal because, quite frankly, I'm running out of topics to talk about. And, I could talk about Doubleson, I could talk about donuts, I could talk about, each individual business that really has been important to me. And I think that all can be sewn into my story. And I know I've seen other YouTubers come out with videos like Draw My Life. So this is a Draw My Life-esque type of video without any drawing. So, this is the life of TP, and I'm just going to kind of, not even hint so much on the hip hop aspect. Like, obviously we'll get there, but, I really just want to give an overview. And I don't know, if I'm going to start, when I did enter into the hip hop industry or how far back that I'm going to go, but I think I'm going to start around 15 years old because that was when I really got the entrepreneurial bug. And I think that, looking around at the rest of my family, my father had businesses in the past, but unfortunately due to issues with partners, things didn't really work out, or my grandfather having his own machine shop. I did have influences. I did have entrepreneurial influences in my life, and I think that being your own boss, being able to do what you want when you want, having, I wouldn't say financial freedom. I definitely don't want to say that because it is definitely a struggle. So definitely don't quote me on that. But what I will say is when I was 15 years old, I was coming up on my 16th birthday, and I was looking for money to afford a car. And I had a family member that had wanted to give me some money, like unknowingly. And that's really where this whole story starts, where we had a family friend that had a couple nice cars. And she had me detail them. And actually, my parents told her, hey, rather than just giving Tony $1,000, rather make him work for it. And at the time, I just thought that, hey, I was doing a real good job. So I'm 15 years old making, upwards of $200 per car detail. And back then I wouldn't even consider it car detailing because I was really just buying products from Walmart, individual packages, and doing my best. And I think that I took advantage of everything that I could, and I was able to earn enough money to afford a car, and that was a great experience for me. But at the same time, I'm 15 years old making upwards of $200 per job. I'm going to continue doing that. Do I want to go work at, some 9-to-5 job and get all kinds of, I don't want to say trouble, but what are you really going to be building? If you work for McDonald's, or not saying that you couldn't buy McDonald's stock. I'm not saying you couldn't, but you're really not working for anybody, other than that corporation. And I think that at 15 years old, at 16 years old, I was like, wow, I could really take advantage of this. And so that really started my journey on entrepreneurship. is just by detailing friends and family's cars. And as the whole process came about, I did start, going to KOI and getting more high-end products and doing my due diligence. Big shout out to Ammo NYC. And I really learned the science behind detailing water-based products versus silicone-based, and how a lot of Armor All products were silicone-based, and that how, although it provided a shiny result, that really was blocking a lot of the UV rays from exiting the leather or the pleather, and that would also create cracking. So although someone who, sure, you just bought a new car, you want to Armor All it, it looks nice and shiny, but by the time it's the second owner or the third owner who, they're buying a used car, they don't care as much, they start seeing all of this cracking because nobody really took care of the car, from a scientific standpoint. And that's why I really tried to use a lot of water-based products. And although it was a little bit more expensive, I was getting paid, $150, $200. And at the time, I used this as an excuse to, really, I'd save all my receipts. I'd, do accounting. I'd, try to develop a brand. And, big shout out to Lisa Bombach. She is also a woman that belongs to my German club. She helped me out with my logo, the TP Entertainment, in addition to the TP Auto Detailing logo. And I really feel like that was the first time that I could recognize how important branding was, because I wasn't going to be a detailer for the rest of my life. And the moment that I realized that, it really put me on a different trajectory. And I really recognized how important relationships were, because at the end of the day, I was at people's homes. They had to trust me with their car, and not only with their car, but in their home. I had a mobile auto detailing business. So, in a lot of situations, I was visiting, people's homes. So I was really able to develop a pretty hearty relationship with these people. And what I also will say is, a lot of my customers, I did develop, well over 100 individual customers that, although, family was, and obviously I would get referrals, from family to their friends, but although their emotional support was endless, their financial support was limited. And, who can really afford to detail their car multiple times a year? It's like I said, $150, $200 were the average prices. And that's really not going to, I'm not going to get, I don't want to say I'm not going to get rich off of that, but nobody can really afford that, at least in my market. And like I said, since I would probably say 50% of my customers were family, I really also didn't want to push their button, their family friends. So what I started realizing is that I wasn't in the detailing business in order to detail cars, that I was in the detailing business in order to develop relationships. Because of the people that were able to detail cars, I was able to, like I said, go in their homes and really develop a very genuine relationship. And while I was, working with them, I could speak about, going to college or marketing or my branding, or just, brainstorm about all kinds of things. And a lot of these people own their own businesses. And I think that, this is really something that I can thank, and be appreciative of that time, although I'm not detailing today. And where that really, puts me at is that whole business model was successful. And one of the clients that I had made had a marketing promotional brand company called Embroidered Me, or at least his dad did. And while I was at his house, he had a BMW, and I would detail it maybe once or twice a year. So, within that time, we got to really, build. And he was a younger gentleman, and he also valeted cars. So I had experience valeting cars at that point as well. And we can go a little bit into that. But during this time, I was also going to UC Blue Ash for business management, getting a 3.8 GPA. I was lucky enough to get on the dean's list, as well as being introduced into the National Society of Collegiate Scholars, I believe. And that was a huge win for me, And I think that, going from high school where, I get A, B's, C's, and in Spanish I'd get a D or something. But I was getting probably C's in English. So I went from getting C's in English to A's in college. And I think that, big shout out to UC. They had the writing lab, and, they had a lot of resources. So, during this time, I was learning a lot about marketing, and I was meeting my business partner, Trevor, in a marketing class. And, while we were, this was around the same time that I was meeting Trevor, as started working with Embroidered Me. And I can really say that it was a great time to, really see two of the dynamics, because working with an established marketing company and selling maybe $200, $300, $400 jobs, they would look at me and say, hey, unless you're selling $1,000 jobs, this is really, not worth your time, because if you're selling, $200, $300, $400 worth of stuff, you're only maybe making $40. And, although I could take that criticism, I also wasn't receiving a lot of training, so I really felt like, talking to Trevor, talking to College Beats, that, in learning in college, that the highest level of selling was consulting. So rather than just approaching a business like College Beats and saying, all right, well, how can I sell them shirts? Rather, if they don't have a logo, if they don't have a brand, if they don't have a website, how are they going to sell $1,000 worth of shirts anyways? And I really felt like, that was a conflict of mine, because at 18, 19 years old, not saying that I was, too big of a bitch to ask for $1,000, but, if I haven't really developed any relationship with that company, what am I really going to do? And I think that that's where I kind of pivoted and took a more consulting type of role. And to this day, guess what? College Beats still doesn't have a website. That although you even work with these companies like College Beats, doesn't mean they're going to listen to you. And I think that this has been such a long process. And so, like I said, so we went from the detailing business into Embroidered Me, out of Embroidered Me, into College Beats. So here we have arrived. We're coming up on the 14-minute mark, and we're finally at where all you guys probably started to get to know me. So let's dive a little bit deeper into College Beats. And at the time, a lot of College Beats' work was all done on Twitter, had about 20,000 followers and about 18,000 following. And I really, at that time, had no real idea about Twitter. I wasn't a Twitter guy, more so YouTube. I had done, videos on fishing or on my 1991 Camaro. You can find those playlists. And although I had some experience with camera work, I was more so interested in the music aspect. And I felt like a lot of the music that they were promoting was all copyrighted. And although on Twitter or SoundCloud they would be getting, 1 to 5 million impressions, their pages kept on getting striked down, for copyright infringement. So, I sat down with Trevor and I said, hey man, let me gain access to your DMs. Let me find people that have been contacting you that do have original music in order to promote them. And, to this day, we still haven't done that, but that's Trevor's decision, right? And so we also learned that to have secondary accounts and then repost from those secondary accounts. So then in the cases secondary accounts get taken down, the main account doesn't. So that's something we learned because we were without Twitter for at least a year. And luckily, other German family, friends, lawyers were able to help us out. So big shout to Dave. And so, within that time, I just started getting on the phone and talking to artists all over the country. And it was a process where, I posted a lot on Facebook, started talking more and more about college beats. I did actually develop them a website. And I started getting contacted by people that I had gone to school with, people in other genres of music that, started recognizing. And during this time as well, I met someone that, and I really don't want to expose too many names here because I'm not working with them right now. I want to be diplomatic here, guys. So I'm trying to think how I want to put this. So it was I was friends with his brother, so I didn't really know him that well, but in high school, I always treated everybody the same way. I was always nice to everybody, so, everybody felt like they could approach me. And at this time, this gentleman had contacted an entertainment company that was stationed in Phoenix, Arizona, okay? And the company's name was JVR Entertainment Group. And he had applied for an event management position. And so when I saw that he had heard something back, I was like, all right, well, this, seems pretty serious. So, I went ahead and applied for an event coordinating position. So, throughout the next couple weeks, we, went all through the orientation. He had spoken about how they had, several semi-trucks and several planes, and that they really worked on hundreds of events throughout the year. And this, all sounded, very interesting, especially from the college beats angle. How could I work this? And, during the same time, I was also reaching out locally. And, maybe this is a little bit less traditional than most people, but, it is a part of my story. Tinder. At the time, I wasn't looking for any dates. I was more so looking for someone that was in business. And at the time, now I could probably use some health insurance, but, if you were a nurse, I really didn't need that. And, I was approaching anybody and saying, hey, what are you doing business/school wise? And like I said, if you were a nurse, I really didn't need that at that time. And so I stumbled upon a girl, and she had, something in her bio along the lines of her name and then empire. So I was like, oh, wow, like this girl's developing her own empire, which, to most people would sound kind of weird. But like I said in the past few episodes, I believe ego is the most important aspect of entrepreneurship and self-promotion. So I was like, all right, bet, let's see what we can do. And she actually ultimately introduced me to the first producer that I met in the city. So, big shout out to MacNiff on Hoffner Street at the time. We had no bathroom, and there was interactions that I had with Hollywood Bentley and Taylor made a couple, real short 30, 1 minute clips. And how everybody does it by sharing it to countless, hundreds of friends, right? And so I was lucky enough, during the same time that I was working with this entertainment company to approach MacNiff and say, hey man, we are looking for places for artists to record when they are in town. And that was, the start of the relationship. And during this time, it all kind of came to a head where we were working with this entertainment company and the owner had another partner, and the partner was working outside of the business on other projects. And ultimately, around January, Christmas time, the partnership fell apart. And at the time, throughout the whole orientation process, I really started to key into what I had done with College Beats, as a consultant, as somebody that really could respect long-term vision over short-term gains, because I knew, just how I said previously, that if you don't have a brand, if you don't have a website, how long are you really going to be able to sell shirts for? Sure, I may get, a couple $100 out of you, but if your company isn't successful, I'm not really going to be that wealthy. So I applied that same technique to JVR Entertainment Group, with, what was occurring with their partners. And, I put it out there that I would be willing to, work. And unfortunately, in that period of time, we also kind of got a little bit of a lack of communication, really, because we had just got hired on and the partnership has just ended. So, in talking to my father, and my father saying like, hey, before, you take any additional positions, because that's what the owner was talking about. He sent me a letter of intent to offer me the COO and president position. And for me, I was kind of caught off guard, and I said, well, what does this really entail, and how can I negotiate this? Because one of my biggest, not pet peeves, but one of my biggest goals is equity, really. And my dad connected me with a family friend who I mentioned earlier is, belongs to my German club. And, we spoke, a lawyer, and he said, Tony, why would you move all the way over to Phoenix to build somebody else's company? And I said, well, the legal infrastructure, of course, and obviously the network. And he said, well, if you stay in Cincinnati, I will become your partner. And so that is really what took College Beats to the next level, when our lawyer became our partner and would, help us out with cost, would help us out with LLC creation and, the full nine. And that's really what kickstarted College Beats. And I think that, now looking back at it, the same thing that could have been said about Trevor, that, I was coming and building somebody else's company. And I don't want to get too sticky onto that subject, because we're talking about the past here. So, at that point, I was also working with MacNiff at the studio, and our relationship was kind of dependent on JVR Entertainment, having artists come through. And I didn't really feel comfortable having artists come through anyways, because there was no bathroom. And so that all kind of came to a head where the girl that had originally introduced me, I come to find out that her grandmother had some health issues, some seasonal depression, and she just kind of disappeared without saying anything for a couple months. And, I was really sitting down with MacNiff, and I was uncomfortable because she had walked me in through the door. And I was going to be loyal to her because she's the one that brought me in there. And that I wasn't going to make a deal with MacNiff until, she was a part of it. So now, look at us. We've dropped JVR Entertainment Group. We've moved away from MacNiff. And I'm sitting there for 2 weeks with nothing, right? I'm sitting there going, wow, you know, we went all the way from an entertainment company to producers, and now I'm sitting here with nothing. And finally, some residuals came in from that video work from MacNiff, I'm assuming, through the body of Frank Oglesby. So Frank Oglesby contacted me on Facebook and said, let's network. That was it. And, you know, he reached out and said, hey, you know, I've got a clothing brand down on Ray Street, where he was a bit of a consultant himself, where not only did he have his own clothing brand, but he had, you know, 4 or 5 different branding lines. So, you know, this was really something that, you know, I saw as, you know, not only was I doing work for him, but I was also going to be able to consult all these other companies. And I helped him with a lot of the remodeling to get ready to open, in addition to taking a whole heck of a lot of video. And we worked with Yayco, Push, Certified Excellence, a handful of other clothing brands in the city. And fortunately, that remodeling video did about 1,600 views, give or take. And so I was really able to take advantage of that. And Frank, you know, and I'll tell you this right now, not just Frank, but in any of these situations that I'm going to be talking about, that in the case that people aren't paying you, the only way they can compensate you with is their network. And when you're starting from the bottom, that's valuable. And I think that I can appreciate that time, because at any time, if I would have said, hey, you know, I need $200, you know, what's my work really worth, right? And he started introducing me to other gentlemen by the name of Mark Bridges with Hip Hop Period. And he was looking for a public relations manager. And at the time, me and Frank, you know, we ran around to all the different radio stations, you know, throwing out press releases for the opening. So, you know, I really had a decent amount of experience, you know, not only on the ground, but also digitally, you know, working on Pete's social media, you know, building him up a couple thousand followers. And so when I met Mark, he invited me over to Uptown Radio 513, and I think I even invited him out to the compound as well. But the first week I was interviewed, and you can also find that video on our channel as well. But I really got to speak a lot about what I'm speaking about today. You know, being an entrepreneur at 15 years old, you know, the importance of long-term vision over short-term gains, the importance of relationships, the importance of, you know, not nickeling and diming people. And I think that that was also something that I didn't hit on enough earlier, you know, now that we're coming up on the 28-minute mark, that how important it is to not take advantage of people, because I've got wealthy family, and what they explained to me is just because they're wealthy, they get taken advantage of all the time. That people raise their rates just because they're wealthy, and that's not fair. And what I really try to do is, you know, no matter who I work with, like whether or not it's a hip hop artist or, you know, some owner of a company, I'm going to treat everybody the same, and I'm going to give them a reasonable price. And they're going to come back to me because I'm giving them a reasonable price, and I'm treating them the same way that I would want to be treated, the same way that everybody should be treated. And I think that, you know, I was really able to talk a lot about that on Uptown Radio 513 with Bruno. So big shout out to Bruno. And the first week I was interviewed, and the following week I was running the show. So we were lucky enough in Mark Bridges' home to shoot, I believe, a Lantana interview as well as Jay Guts. So that was the first time that I got to meet Lantana and Jay Guts. You know, the first, can you believe that? The first show that I managed Lantana, like the biggest artist in the city. So, that was a hell of an experience for me. And so, big shout out to Mark Bridges. I will say that he has been my biggest OG because we went from his home to Timeless, and from Timeless, I met X, I met Gary, I met Vic, and now Vic has his own studio, big shout out to him, Attic Studios. And I was able to, obviously you can tell I'm a bit of a talker here. And since I had all the equipment, I would be there till whenever I'd pack up and my mouth would get going and I would get to talking and I would be the last one that would leave. And unfortunately, in a lot of these studios, their internet was not sufficient, so in a lot of situations, we couldn't produce. And whether or not that's a matter of my inexperience, which it was, which today, we would have just went post-production instead of live, but it was what it was. And we also went all the way, from Timeless over to Prodigious, with Prodigy Rain and Young Ally for their opening. I was there, for their opening. And, although it was really difficult to get Wi-Fi, not only that, but there was 15 other people on the Wi-Fi itself. So even if it had strong Wi-Fi, there'd be, 15 other people in the building. And what are you going to tell people like, hey, everybody turn off their phones? And maybe I may have the confidence to do that now, but back then I certainly didn't. And so I got to meet a lot of people, but hip hop period was basically over with, because if we didn't have an internet connection, we couldn't really produce the show. So that was unfortunate. But for me, I was the one that was doing a significant amount of the networking, because like I said, I wasn't getting paid. So I'd spend, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours at the studio, talking shit. And that I was really able to, work a little bit with Timeless, and then they moved. So I primarily, started working with Prodigious, and big shout out to Prodigy Rain. And the same thing that I did for Frank Oglesby, I did for Prodigy with Prodigious Recordings. And I was, given their Instagram. I built up, 2, 3, 4, I think 2,000 followers over there. And I really got to take advantage of that network as well, and once again, not getting compensated, but I would be getting compensated in network. So, I'd be on the east side of town, 45 minutes away, and Prodigy would call me and say, hey, TP, we've got a big artist coming out tonight. This is really, something worth your time, something that is, what would I even say? Magical, special, a vibe, catching a heavy vibe. And the artist was Skrilla from MMG, and that was one of the songs that Prodigy was working on with him. So big shout out to Skrilla. And this is kind of a touchy subject that I don't want to get too much into, but we also had an opportunity to work with his management on a Punching for Peace event, which I went to and went over and beyond. And the director handed me like $100 to go get pop. And I had to go to CVS downtown on Fountain Square, and they were closing in like 5 to 10 minutes. How was I supposed to carry $100 worth of pop, right? And so I convinced the one of the workers there, like, hey man, like if you need to even hold on to my license, we'll make this happen. And so he's like, oh, no problem. So we got a couple of skids from the back of the CVS, and we did a real good job. And a lot of the other videographers were a little bit late, so I was lucky enough to shoot Skrilla, Rico Nasty, Prodigy Rain, and Starship. And Starship was a group of guys that we really connected with through this whole process, through working with Prodigious. And, at the time, Trevor really didn't go to any meetings. He'd maybe come for 5-10 minutes. Oh, there's traffic. Oh, it's raining. oh, the owner of the studio isn't here. Trevor really didn't have any interest in networking, and that was primarily, what I did. And so, I started developing relationships with Starship and, explaining how, what maybe not our, because maybe I need to speak, more for myself. And I think that was probably my biggest lesson to learn from that whole situation, is that I don't want to say that I was lying to people, because I was trying to represent Trevor in the most best light possible. But, I should have been letting Trevor speak for himself. But if he was never there, what was I really supposed to say? Anything but, positive things. And so, explaining to them that, hey, maybe we're not ready right now, but maybe in the next, 2 to 10 years, we'd be ready. And unfortunately, but, also fortunately, the manager was a little bit more proactive, and he set us up with quite a lot of opportunities where, like I said, Trevor hadn't gone to any meetings. So one of the first things that really Trevor spent, any time and even at that point, money, because, looking back, sitting down with Trevor and me contemplating, putting some money into a camera, putting some money into the laptop that we're, using right now, that was all my money. $2,000 into the Canon 80D and a ton of accessories. It was kind of the transformer of cameras, in addition to $2,000 for a laptop. That's $4,000 plus out of my own pocket, in order to, get us to McNiff's, in order to get us to Frank's, in order to get us to Mark Bridges, to get us to Timeless with X, to get us to Prodigy's with, Prodigious. And that, if I would have not had that money to invest into that camera, into that laptop, that was all my doing. And during that time, I also had a company called TP Entertainment Group, because at the time I really, didn't see a lot of support for a college branded company. And I think that, a lot of people, in the hip hop market hadn't gone to college. I talked to Matt often, Doubleson, about that, is that's just not the target market, and, I saw a niche for college, but, I used TP Entertainment Group. I used, my company, in order to promote College Beats and promote, a lot of other individuals. And I think that, let's call it a front. Let's call it a front. I fronted with myself in order to bring College Beats into the forefront, because, like I said, Trevor really didn't participate whatsoever. And so the first time that Trevor really did participate in any way was with Starship, because we felt, a real nice connection with them. And their management ended up connecting us with Post Malone. And at the time, we weren't, like I said, although I may have been ready, Trevor really wasn't ready to pull the trigger. So that whole situation, although we did get to meet Post Malone, although, we had, and I'm going to probably go into, I wish I could say everything that I want to say, but it was not the best. It was probably the worst and the best time of my life. Because although it was a big opportunity, Trevor wasn't ready. He was not ready to pull the trigger. So, we missed out on a big, the hugest opportunity of my life. And I really feel like, at that time, a lot of people give you an ultimatum. And a lot of people don't particularly care for Trevor because they didn't really see, what he was doing. But, at the end of the day, he is my partner, and I am loyal, the same way that I was loyal to that girl that brought me into McNiff's studio, that I'm not going to do business with someone that isn't willing to do business with my partner. That if, because that's just karma, that my life, for the rest of my life, I wouldn't be able to sleep with myself. I wouldn't be able to go to sleep thinking like, all right, like I've done the best that I can. And although, you know, I don't want to say Trevor has been making mistakes because I've been speaking for him. You know, he hasn't told me, you know, verbatim, like, hey man, you know, go search out Post Malone. Like, yeah, you know, go get me a meeting. Like, I'm ready to, you know, throw 60 bands at this guy. Never said that. You know, I'm the one that put him up to it. And I think that this is a little bit of a theme that we'll get into, that, you know, we end up, you know, burning a bridge there. And I think that that was a really, really hard time for me in a period of depression, you know, in a period of being burnt out, because I had put up, you know, thousands of dollars in equipment and, you know, hundreds of hours, you know, whether or not it was working with Frank or working out with all these different studios or outlets, that this was all culminating up into working with a bigger artist. And unfortunately, we just weren't ready at that time. And I took that as a big hit, you know, a real big hit. But fortunately for Trevor, he took that as motivation, you know, that he hadn't really, you know, been focusing too much. And at the time with the Canon 80D, it's not 4K. So I really couldn't, you know, shoot music videos. I really wasn't confident with my work. And I had worked with other videographers with 4K cameras, and I really felt like, wow, like this is something truly inspiring. And I went on the internet, I found, you know, the best of the best, and we walked into a camera shop. And that's really where this whole, you know, last year really all comes together. And around this same time, we also got invited by Monty C. Benjamin to be a part of the Cincy Secret Show, and that was a partnership between Donuts and Alcohol, Double Sin, and College Beats. And we were lucky enough to have 3 total shows. And like I said, during this time, I was burnt out. So although Monty was probably expecting for me to make a ton of footage, I really wasn't, you know, I wasn't with it because I had just lost out on the biggest contact possible. So sorry, Monty, that I dropped the ball on that one. And so, you know, now looking back at that, you know, we were able to develop a relationship at that point with Double Sin and Donuts and Alcohol. And, you know, Double Sin does do a lot with their magazine in addition to Donuts and Alcohol with their interview series, you know, coming up on their 4th season now. We're going to be recording on the 26th at Timeless. And that was a big period of my life because I really didn't see any future, you know, but luckily Trevor did. And where Trevor's vision went was DJs. And I think, you know, through the Cincy Secret Show, the one thing that we could bring to the table was a DJ. And so through Starship, through the relationship that we still had with them, they had a friend named Anthony Hope, also known as DJ Hope. And so that was our first event that we had with DJ Hope, was a part of the Cincy Secret Show. So that was the beginning. Sometime the beginning of last year was that we started down the DJ route. And, you know, coming from my ideology that I've spoke about the past few days with the Freestyle Friday, that my goal was to have a Post Malone, to have the biggest show possible, and that was no longer a possibility. And I kind of lost a lot of my ambition because I felt like, well, you know, unless we have these big shows, where are we going to be making money? Because I was, you know, developing all these relationships with people. But at the end of the day, if we're not able to give them a bigger platform, who are we really going to be able to break? And I think at this time, I really isolated myself. I got a new number. I got a new phone. I went out to Vegas to see another artist that I had started to develop a relationship with, Kian Hassani. And although he had more ornate, unique type of Persian hip-hop vibe type of music, he was a good friend. I think I needed to take some time, and because at that time, before any of that, I was probably on, four phone calls a day. I'd wake up to 10 missed calls, 10 text messages, and I felt like, if someone was working harder than me, that wasn't acceptable. And I really, put in as much work as I possibly could. And so during that time, I kind of backed off a little bit. Like I said, I didn't do the recap videos for the Cincy Secrets show. And I don't want to go too deep into that drama, but it was a free show. Like it really wasn't, making a whole heck of a lot of sense. And during that time as well, I got to meet with DJ JDough through the Cincy Secrets show, which, he DJ'd, and I was able to, chop it up and, talk some shit with him. And, he offered, like I said in the episode two, three episodes ago, that he was looking for us to do an EP.5 for him. And at the time I was like, well, we don't have any press for you. Like, we haven't done anything. And so Cody helped us out, and we talked a little bit about going into the camera shop. So let's go back to that before we go into the whiz. And so after the point of Post Malone, I really felt like, I gave up that opportunity, in a way, because I didn't have a 4K camera, because I really didn't feel like I was good enough, because I didn't have 4K. And so I even gave up that opportunity to another videographer that will remain nameless. And, I put him in the position because he had a GH5. He would be a lot better than me, in that I sacrificed, to put somebody in that position. And so, I really admire, Cody, because when we did go to the camera store after I had done all this research, he totally talked Trevor out of everything that I wanted to buy and put us in like a used Sony A7R2, right? And we didn't get the Ronin that I wanted. The DJI Ronin, the gimbal. We got some Zildjian something. And that was the time where I was still on my networking binge, and I started talking, more and more to Cody, and he spoke about how he had a lot of friends, Gorilla, Griff, Wolf, Maine. There's a handful of artists that Cody's real close to. So Cody had an interest in college beats. Cody had an interest in media. So we were very fortunate that we were able to walk into the camera store and not only walk away with $4,000 worth of gear, but we were also able to walk away with, $30,000 worth of equipment and a body. And that was really the start of a whole heck of a lot of better quality, from us. Like, whether or not we had our own camera, and unfortunately we did buy a Sigma 18 to 35, which was way too heavy. And not only that, but it was also a crop sensor. So it's like, I obviously did not know what the hell that I was talking about. But, during that period of time, we did, like, if you do look back at the first episode of the Freestyle Friday, that you see it. I've got the Canon 80D on the gimbal, and it does not look as good as it does on episode, 28, 29 now, because Cody was the biggest player in bringing in his Sony A7S, which was more, video focused, and the color profile was a lot better. And not only that, but, Cody's skill with the settings and the smoothness on the gimbal. And, I just want to, reiterate as much as I can, how much I appreciate what Cody's been able to do for us. So, big shout out to Cody. Definitely book him. Cody Kirshner or Kissinger. I apologize if I don't say your name properly. But what I will say is after we met with Cody, and he didn't help with the Cincy Secret show very much, but like I said, I met DJ JDough from that experience. Then we started on the Freestyle Friday, and we were able to, not only create content for that, but we were also able to do a couple listening parties. So we did the Preem listening party as well as the vlog, which you can see down in the description box below. And we also got to work with DreamDoll as well as JDough. So that was, some big artists, some big interviews, real nice. And so, big shout out to JDough for putting us in that position, because there was a lot of other people like Donuts and Alcohol, which, they got to interview Preem, but, we were getting, 30 minutes, 20, 30 minutes of content podcast-wise, in addition to a 10-minute vlog, 1-minute recap. We were getting a lot of content. So, compared to a lot of the other platforms, we were very lucky. So I want to give a big thanks to JDough as well as Timeless for hosting all of those listening parties. And so really the direction that it went from there, now that I've got to think about, because this is coming up on, the 51 or so minute mark, and this is coming into the present. We worked on the podcast there with the listening parties in addition to the Freestyle Friday, getting Double Sin involved with the Freestyle Friday as well with Matt, and talking a little bit more with Matt and having Trevor's input as well, which brought us into the DJ Jam. And that was the topic of the discussion a few episodes ago. And, big shout out to Timeless Recordings for hosting that. And that was really the next thing that we started working with. And we had Cody to help us out as well. And we had about 10 individual artists. And this is unreleased, so I don't want to go too deep into it. But, we really started to work with a lot of different DJs in addition to Chris, the engineer over at Timeless, and Chris is also the engineer for Donuts and Alcohol. So that's how Chris got into contact with Timeless was through Donuts and Alcohol. And so, through working with Donuts and Alcohol, through working with Double Sin, we went to the DJ Jams. And that's basically where we are, in the grand scheme of things. We're getting ready to release the DJ Jams. We're also, having a whole bunch of more local type of work. And like I said, I'll let Trevor go into the DJs a little bit more. But what I will say is we're coming up on, probably 4 or 5, going on 6 residencies, local residencies in the city as well. So we've really been successful, or Trevor's been successful. And this is something, that's kind of a rude awakening, because as you can tell, I have done a significant amount of groundwork for College Beats, and Trevor does not believe that I should earn any compensation from the DJs, because evidently I did not participate in that. So that's also something to get into on another day. But, that really just shows you that, you can have all the greatest intentions in the world. You can be as loyal as possible, like whether or not it's bringing somebody to Post Malone or Post Malone, building the rest of the company, that, that really doesn't matter. That the only thing that matters is green at the end of the day. And if you're not able to bring in the green, then you're not going to be able to eat. And I think that has been something that has been going around in my brain quite a bit. Looking, making forward looking statements, looking at, all the other partners that we have, and, people with money versus people with talent, and people with talent versus, people with connections. And I really think that is something that I've learned throughout the years to start to adapt to, and who knows, like who knows who's going to backstab you. You can support somebody, you can put your whole life savings, you can, dump everything that you have emotionally into a company, and it doesn't mean that, they're going to take care of you. They can tell you that they're going to take care of you, and that can be a lie. That can be a farce. You can set them up with lawyers, you can set them up with LLCs, you can set them up with logos, you can set them up with, connections, whether or not that's the Wiz or Double Sin or Donuts Alcohol or our DJs, and they're still gonna continue to take advantage of you, and then leave you out to dry, and that's really something that coming up on the hour 56-minute mark is something that I really want to reflect, and get really personal, because this is something that I'm currently dealing with. I feel like we've developed a good relationship with the Wiz. We've developed a good relationship with, a lot of these other partners. And, my whole main goal of the company had always been to, have the biggest show possible. And if, we can offer a $15,000 budget and nobody's going to come back to us with anything, that, they're looking for $30,000, $60,000. And if, that's just not the case, that's just not something that, we can splurge on, I've got to start making my own decisions. Whether or not it's the College Beats compound, bunny ears, or, whatever I plan to do, because, at a certain point, I've got to look at the rest of my life and look at it and go, well, who can I depend on? And obviously on this series, the DatDudeTP Rambling series, that I can only depend on myself. I can get on phone calls with, or lack thereof, phone calls with a lot of my other partners. There isn't a lot of people that are gonna treat you how you expect to be treated. A lot of people have, family to deal with, relationships, fitness. I mean, there are so many other goals that people have in their mind other than what you want. And just because you want it doesn't mean that they have to want it as much or for you. You really have to put yourself not only in the position, but put people around you that are going to support you. And today, in today's society, that is so rare. And talking a little bit, more about, college, they spoke about how the worst type of business to go into is a partnership, and looking back at my father, with his failed business, due to partners, not doing what they said they were going to do, and that's really something that I've got to look at, and it's very disheartening to me that I have put in the past, 2 years of my life, and that, I am being told by my partner that I don't deserve anything, from the DJs, or, and that he, just wants to buy my equity out, so that's, 2 years of my life, I don't want to say, exactly, what assets that I've sold, or, what money, gas or food, or just, and that's not even speaking for the amount of time that I spent, where I could have been doing other things, but, it's in the tens of thousands of dollars. And, a couple $1,000s here and there really isn't going to help me break even, and to just take, everything that I've done, And I think that, looking back at, my lawyer saying like, hey man, why would you go and build somebody else's business when you could just build it here? And unfortunately, that's not what happened. My quote unquote business is being offered to be bought out. And I sacrifice a significant amount of time. And I'm lucky, because I do have a lot of access to equipment. I do have a lot of, experience. So it definitely wasn't the worst time of my life, but there was definitely a lot of opportunities that were missed. And, moving forward, I've got to look at everybody a whole hell of a lot differently. That you can't just expect people to treat you how you want to be treated. That a lot of people weren't as lucky. My parents, like, they've been together for 20 plus years. Like, I come from a very lucky background. I had a much different upbringing than a lot of people, especially with my German club, and that's even, another realm of conversation that we can kind of do another deep dive into. But, from the time that I was born, I had 300 family members all around me at all times. I had people, taking time out of their day, coaches, that I was a German folk dancer, up until a couple years ago. I used to, play a lot of sports, recreationally, of course. And, I stopped dancing. I stopped, doing a lot in order to put, 150%, behind college beats, and I've missed a lot of those relationships. And a lot of those relationships are no longer at the German club, because, people grow up, things change, people change. But I'm really sitting here, talking to myself. And I think that has been the whole point of this whole rambling series, is to kind of put all my ducks in a row. Look at the experiences that I've had over the past 2 years and put it past me. Because no matter what, the only person that I can depend on is myself. And whether or not that means going back to school or applying for media-related jobs, like I said in the past, my camera was just to get my foot in the door. That I really was just trying to get a bigger and bigger network for college beats. So I don't particularly care about producing. I'm more interested in consulting, whether or not that's in the music industry or if that's in the tech sector. I do have a family member that will also remain nameless that is planning on moving to California in the next year. And that's also something that I have closely been following, because there's a lot of startups up there. And if I'm stupid enough to offer, media in exchange for equity, and hopefully I'll have a lawyer and hopefully I'll have partners that, won't backstab me again, and hopefully, rather than just putting all my eggs into one basket, maybe I do need to diversify. I do need to stop listening to people that have said, hey, TP, you need to focus. And I think that over the past year, that's what I've done a significant amount of doing, is focusing. I shut down, we should be on TP Entertainment Group's YouTube right now, but we're on College Beats. You're looking at my Instagram, with over 10,000 followers. That used to be TP Entertainment Group. I built the Instagram following on the main page, and on the compound page. Like, I can build 1,000 Instagram followers a week. And although that's from the technique of mass following and mass unfollowing, that's just a technique. And Keon, speaks about how, like, oh man, like, I don't want you to do that for me. But I look at Keon dead in the face and go, hey man, I wouldn't know you if it wasn't for that technique. What the hell are you talking about? And although the impressions don't, look similar, from a perception basis, it looks a lot better. And whether or not these startup companies are approaching angel investors or anybody, branding is super important. So I definitely think that that is something that I need to reestablish myself in, because I only have 24% in college beats. What's the, 80 some, percentage of my time that I'm missing out on, and just take 67% of my time. What, I'm giving 150% to college beats. What is that 76% of time? That's the type of conversation that, we need to have. And we are coming up on the 1 hour mark, and I'll tell you the truth, I don't have anything to do. I'm sitting here in the compound. We're waiting on the doors, we're waiting on installation, we're waiting on a lot of things with the building. So I believe it's my mother's birthday dinner tonight as well. So I'm going to be spending some time with some family. And I think that that's really what I need to do. I need to, spend some time with family, spend some time with friends, now that the Freestyle Friday series has come to a conclusion. And I've just got to do some soul searching. I've got to look at, whether or not it's DJ jams or the DJs in general. What's that, 76, what's that 76, percent of the time that I need to be spending my time on? And just to sit here in silence, listen to the heater, and I'm just gonna think for a second. I'm gonna I don't want to say that I want to sit here and pray, but maybe a nice little prayer to my grandfather, and just thank him for putting me in this position, this building, and just a moment of silence here, guys. So that was a nice little few seconds of silence here, and just to really think about myself. I think that that's definitely something that I need to recognize, and I think I think a lot more about other people than I think about myself, and I would almost consider myself a bit of a jack of all trades, a con man. I can really couture myself into any situation. I can I think Evan Flo was talking about this on Matt and Gravel's Future Moguls podcast, that there was a technique used, sympathetic audience control, where you changed how you appeared in order to control people, and in order to manipulate people. And I think that that's a sickness, and that's something where you put yourself to the side in order to appeal to a certain audience. And I think that although short term that may make sense, that may get you connections, that may get you a network, but it may be with the wrong people. That if you had to change yourself in order to be around those people aren't probably people that you should be around with in the first place. And I think that is something that I'm waking up to, because although I do have such a wide-reaching network, I'm not getting compensated. I'm getting backstabbed. There really aren't anybody that is sitting across from the table from me right now. I've got a 3,600 square foot building that I own. I've got thousands of dollars worth of equipment that I've, been lucky enough to network myself into. And I've got nobody on the other side of the table. What does that tell you? That tells you that I don't have the right people around me. Like, I may have the equipment, I may have the building, I may have the knowledge, but I don't have the people. And maybe that's because I'm not the person that is appealing to those type of people. Maybe like I was talking about earlier with my cousin heading to California, maybe a change of scene, maybe a start, a fresh start, to spend, that 67% of my time, that I really want to visit California. I don't see living there. I mean, I could even see myself learning to code. I am pretty technical. I do have a pretty good memory, but I don't know how difficult coding would be, but it probably would take, quite a bit of work. But these are all things that I'm thinking about, like whether or not providing media, which, like I said, I don't really care about photography, videography, but it's a part of branding. It's a part of getting those companies out there, and I think that moving away from entertainment would be great, because in a lot of situations, you're dealing with a lot of emotions. You're dealing with a lot of subjectivity. And to be honest, I don't probably listen to 90% of the music that I should. That's Trevor's side of the business. So, although I like hip-hop music and I enjoy it, it's not something business-wise that's very feasible. You may get lucky and break an artist, but how often does that really happen? Am I supposed to, build a business off of that? And Trevor, in the position that he has with his finances, he doesn't have any pressure. He can kind of play around and have this as a hobby, when in reality, to me, this is everything. And that I've got to, put my position, although this has been, quote unquote, a whole heck of a lot of fun, it's not done me well for my health, staying up all night long editing videos. It hasn't done me that well friend-wise or family-wise. I haven't been going to dance practice. I haven't been, fitness, I haven't been fitness conscious. I haven't been taking care of myself, and I think that, to wrap this up around the, 1 hour and 12-minute mark, that's really the at the heart of this, that a lot of this work that I have done personally or professionally really hasn't compensated me in any way. And I think that that's where burnout comes from, that you're not getting as much out that you're putting in. And I think that, some people would say, oh, well, you're not networking with artists enough, or you're not, I don't want to hit those couple $100 licks. I'm sorry, like maybe I'm wrong, but I have a lot of fear myself, in the hip hop business. Like I don't come from, that environment. I'm not a part of the culture, so to put myself in a position that I otherwise don't need to be in is scary, and to be honest, with everybody, everybody feels this way. And everybody just isn't as straightforward and bold and exposing themselves like that. But, how I look at it, I put in the work for the past 2 years in order to get to this point. I don't want to have to continue going into the trenches. I don't want to hit those $100 licks where, I've got all this equipment. Someone could threaten me. Someone could, take all of this equipment. Then where would I be? And knock on wood, I've never been in any threat, in person at least. I have, like I said earlier about, the, different situations I didn't really want to bring up because it is due to being threatened, and having my life threatened. And that's just not fun, and whether or not it's managers or artists that, something that Adam 22 says, that if you give someone something that has never had it and then you take it away, they're going to be very upset because they have nothing to live for. They have nothing, nothing stopping them from hurting you or at least threatening you, and maybe they're not going to do anything, but I'm not going to put myself in that situation. I'm not going to put my family in that situation. Right? So, and I know this is a real hard way to end this, but, we have been talking for a good, hour and 15 minutes or so. If you don't already know, this is DatDudeTP, And if you haven't already, please subscribe. If you like these more personal deep dives and want me to talk, more, I mean, I think this is really healthy for me. And I know that a lot of these videos are only maybe getting 5 or 10 views, because who the hell, I'm not really going to promote these too heavily. I'm just sitting here talking to myself. But if anybody finds any value, if they're in a situation with themselves, like with other partners, and I'd love to hear that. If you can go down in the comments and talk about a partnership that you're dealing with, like if you're an entrepreneur and you've been backstabbed, or you've had people take advantage of you, or you've let people take advantage of you. Like, I'm not really being harsh on these people. Like, I've put myself in this position to be taken advantage of, because something else that I used to say, not that we want to get into, is that I intentionally let people take advantage of me, because if they're going to take advantage of me, they're going to take advantage of my network. So I'd rather find out now what type of person they are until we're, really getting into the big bucks. And I think that is definitely something that I'm dealing with Trevor right now, that, him offering to buy me out. We really haven't gone to the big bucks. So it's good to know that that's where he stands, that, someone that has systematically put him in this position, he's just willing to buy them out, for, pennies on the dollar. And that is, good to know, so I know there's probably a lot of other people, other YouTubers that have dealt with this, where, people have taken advantage of your network. And that is, that's the story of my life. And I'm DatDudeTP. And as always, we'll see ya.